Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of some tactical insights. Hope you liked the previous video. So this time we're gonna continue with a matchup against the Ogre Kingdoms, Ogre Khans of my opponent. So we'll just start again with the deployment because there's some things I would have done different. First of all, yeah, as I said, my Forsworn were quite likely to go to the place where they were. At least for me, it was kind of obvious. So I would have liked the Stonehorn to be in the position of the Gnollas, and then the space that Stonehorn frees up, that's where I would have put Tusker Cavalry, a bit more to the right even maybe. So basically just facing the hill so that you can still decide on which side of the hill you want to go, and if you get into like this stalemate of pushing, then you can either hide behind the hill or you can go stand on the hill to get a reroll on your charge range. I think having a hill is very interesting for a unit that is quite dependent on the charge. Well, yeah, obviously, if you get charged, then you're a bit more in trouble, but being close to the hill will make sure that I cannot ignore this hill in any way. And also the Tusker Cavalry, they pair up quite well with the Stonehorn against my Forsworn. And then this leaves the space of the Tusker Cavalry actually to go to the Tribesmen. With the Khan and the BSB, I think that's just a very solid unit. Because in the deployment that we have, yeah, I don't I believe we were doing counter thrust, so that might be why the Tusker Cavalry is a bit more forward. But if you are able to put the Tribesmen in the position where the Tusker Cavalry are, then you zone quite well. So anything that I have that can reliably charge the Tribesmen, yeah, it's just the Knights and the Chimeras, really, and the Barbarian Horsemen, but I don't really want to. Maybe I can fit in a Chariot, but my normal Warriors, the Giant, it's kind of risky to try and charge the Tribesmen because of the rolls. It's more likely gonna fail. And also the lake makes you kind of immune to getting the warriors close to you because I don't want to. I would rather not risk the dangerous terrains for the warriors. So that would be a good place for the tribesmen, I would say, and then the bombardiers can go in the forest, or well, close to the forest. They don't necessarily have to be in the forest because I don't, with my warriors of the Dark Gods, I don't have any shooting anyway. And the reason that you actually want something in the spot of the Tusker Cavalry also even more is because the marker of the Helmor is right in front of the Tusker Cavalry. Yeah, and I think that would just shift the board around quite a bit. My opponent does have the ranged game in this matchup, just a little bit from the Thunder Cannon and the Bombardiers. So I would also propose the Thunder Cannon to be kind of in the spot where the Kin Eater is, so that it's well protected by the rest of the army. And then the Saber Tusks, you can keep them closer to the big blocks of Tribesmen and the Bombardiers. Because all the way on the flank on the right, I don't think it has a lot of value. Like Chaff has big value if you combine it with the pieces that need their decent combat matchups. So if you combine it with just a unit of 3 bruisers, then is it worth the chaff to basically you're investing another 100 points into the unit that you're going to stand next to. Well, I don't know the exact cost of a Saber Tusk, but more or less 100 points. So if it's a unit of bruisers, you're effectively making the unit of bruisers in your army, in the way how it works out, 100 points more expensive. For tribesmen, this is well worth it because If you don't manage to get your tribesmen in a favorable matchup, it might mean that they die. So chaff is basically a bit of an insurance for your units. So yeah, the Saber Tusk all the way on the right, I don't really believe in it. Yeah, let's then go to my deployment. So the Forsworn we already talked about. They're gonna be there, and they're gonna. Well, the plan is to just waddle through the ruins, getting some cover from his bombardiers. So I think the position they are in a good position because the thunder cannon can shoot at them, but they have hard cover like this. So my most attractive, I think it's one of my most attractive choices to shoot at with the thunder cannon because they have such a good, they have the 2+ armor save, and the bombardiers they can also shoot at them. Probably I'm gonna get out of the ruins for one turn, but even if the bombardiers decide to shoot at my Forsworn, I'm probably fine with that. Yeah. So then for the rest, from the left to right. Yeah, the Barbarian Chief on the chariots, I kind of had him just at the end after the rest of my deployment, and I was like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm gonna do with this, so I'll just put it on the left. But basically, the left is covered with the Chimera, Knights, Barbarian Horsemen, and the Warriors with the great weapons. So in my mind, how this is going to work out is that my warriors are going to face up against the tribesmen. They're going to win, and they're going to chase them down because I'm going to break their steadfast. They do have the Zealot's banner, so I would have 20 attacks that hit on 3+, that wound on 2+. That should inflict enough damage to inflict a lot of wounds on this unit. The Barbarian Horsemen are then there to chaff up the Tusker Cavalry for one round, or to lure out a charge of the Tribesmen. If either of them charge, then I should be able to counter-charge at least with the Knights, possibly also with the Barbarian Chief, because I had him anyway, and ideally also with the Warriors. And then the Chimera is there to provide me with another very viable turn of chaff, and also to try and deal with the bruisers. So ideally my Chimera would first go into the bruisers, then either overrun or combat reform, and be outside of the side of the tribesmen. So then my first turn would be to move up the Barbarian Horsemen in front of the Tusker Cavalry or the Tribesmen to lure a charge out, and depending on how units are standing, they could actually flee and try to reform later, and then I could try to charge in with the Knights and or the Warriors, and if that would fail, then my Chimera would ideally be able to move back up to the Tribesmen and the Tusker Cavalry. So my opponent also put just a little bit of space between the Tribesmen and the Tusker Cavalry. The advantage of not having a very strong ranged game is that you can very reliably look at your enemy models and chaff them up without having the chance of removing a model and opening a lane for them. So my Chimera, if it were to successfully engage and get rid of the bruisers, then it could come back with this 20-inch movement and use its long frontage to chaff up both the Tribesmen and the Tusker Cavalry. So yeah, that should be sufficient, but in case everything goes wrong, we still have another Chimera close to the hill and a Giant close to the hill. So the Giant actually still has movement 7, I believe. Yeah, 7. So it's not too slow at all, really. The only sad part is that it doesn't have Swift Stride, but yeah, you can't have it all. And yeah, for the center of the field, yeah, in terms of combat potential, there's not really a lot going on with regards to my opponent. He just has a Stonehorn, which is annoying. Basically, I either have to charge it or I have a unit that dies. and I'm fine to sacrifice anything in my army 1-to-1 with the Stonehorn, except for the warriors with the great weapons and the Forsworn with the Doomlord. If I can get the charge with the warriors with the great weapons onto the Stonehorn, I'm happy. Also for the Forsworn, because the Doomlord hits hard enough. But any of the other units I have, they're just gonna get obliterated by its charge probably. But it's not too bad if I can encounter charge and then get rid of the Stonehorn. So yeah, I put the Barbarian Horsemen in front of my warriors with the halberds, just to use as chaff. But it's during this game also already that I recognize that the Barbarian Horsemen are not very effective as chaff. Because, they are not light troops. So, either you would have to have a unit that's even smaller than 3 for them to function as proper chaff. But in this case, they are just too unwieldy to use. So I would have to put on a Musician, but then they get bit more expensive again. So I might have to go to Flayers instead, which are light troops. But I find with the Helmar that I actually with the Chimeras I believe I already have sufficient chaff maybe. So that's gonna be it for the deployment of the Warriors of the Dark Gods. And then the Helmar is just in the back. I believe I don't really need another portal on the left flank because I already have it. So it can just chill out in the back. If my opponent decides to shoot it with the Thunder Cannon, I'm very happy about it because I have 5 wounds, so I'm gonna survive 1 shot at least. And my battlefield performance is not gonna go down after having had a couple of wounds. So I don't feel like I should definitely protect it that much. Then on portal placement, so having a Helmar frees up a lot of possibilities. You can buy them either without any portals at the start of the game, with 1 portal for 50 points and another portal with another 100 points, I believe. 100 points for a portal is very expensive. I think it's too expensive. Depending on the list, if you build your list around it, then it can work. But then I would go for a very heavy multiple small unit list where you have, let's see, maybe a Doom twice a Doomlord in a very small unit of Forsworn of 3, then 6 units of Fallen. And some units of Chosen just to round it up, I think, maybe. But then you get a real Helmar craze. Everything moving everywhere, etc. But with the current list, I feel that 1 portal is sufficient. And I always try to put my first portal close to my enemy deployment in a zone where I believe I would have trouble to approach otherwise. So this forces my opponent to react to this. If he doesn't react to it, I'm also very fine with it. So ideally I would have put it a bit more to the left to force my opponent to actually deploy something on the flank. But it's fine where it is because you'll mostly see it in later turns. So my opponent, he cannot really advance now with his Tusker cavalry because I might just pop up behind him. And also the reason, I didn't say this yet, but one of the reasons that I always put my first marker close to the deployment of my opponent is because I don't want to give my opponent any clue about where I want to deploy the rest of my army yet. And the first token in my first turn that I usually drop down with my Helmar is a token that's close to at least 3 of my own units that can go through the portal. So that I have to just it's all about flexibility for me. So if I go for the unit that my opponent thinks is gonna go through the portal, then he will prepare for it. So like if I have a warrior unit that would be 25 big and I put a portal next to it, then my opponent is gonna expect that they are gonna go through the portal. Whilst it might not even be that important. So I think it's more important to just have something that can go through the portal close enough to walk through the portal that doesn't seem threatening at first, yet is immensely threatening when it goes through the portal. So what do I mean by this? If you look at the board now, the ideal position with the current deployment for a portal, in my mind, would be just in front of the Forsworn, within 8 inches of the chariot. So first turn I would move up with my warriors behind the hill. My Forsworn would just move up and try to still get some concealment from the ruins. So they would possibly move up with a bit of a wheel towards the right, so that the next turn they could clear the distance between the 2 ruins to still get the hard cover. That would be ideal. And then the chariot would just move towards the middle of the ruins or somewhere there. And then the portal would be placed close to the F of Forsworn in this picture. So then next turn, either the warriors with the halberds could do a swift reform, move into the portal, or the Forsworn, or the chariot. So my opponent has no clue yet what I'm going to do with this portal, what kind of unit footprint he has to keep in mind to block if he wants to block it, and what kind of threat is going to come out of the portal. Because if he's going to turn around with his Tusker cavalry after going forward, there might be that's viable if you only have like a unit of 30 warriors that can go through. But just for a chariot, you might not want to just align everything. But then again, if he just is going to align his Skin Eater to be able to charge anything that comes through the portal, yeah, if it's a unit of 15 warriors with halberds, I don't really think you want to do that. So, yeah, like this, your opponent has to invest more into the portal than probably necessary. And with stuff like chariots, you can do some funny stuff also. So that's it for now. Let's now look at the matchup between my Vampire Covenant and the Undying Dynasty army of my opponent. So this was still an army that was the first army that my opponent put down with Undying Dynasties. So there was still probably a lot to learn in army design. Yet still, he looked at the Shopti with the bows and he was quite impressed by them. And then at the point where I told him that he couldn't stand and shoot with those, he was a bit disappointed. But they are undead, so you can only hold as a charge reaction. So unfortunately, no stand and shoot. So in the battle report itself, I also commented that this was a moment in the battle where I took quite a lot of time to decide what to do in my turn, because I think there's some options here, and I also think that the option that I went for in the battle was actually not the proper option I should have gone for. So what did I end up doing in the battle report? I ended up charging with the Phantom Host on the top of the field into the flank of the skeletons of my opponent with the Pharaoh. This was about 13 inches, 14 inches, so I needed a 7 or an 8. So yeah, it was a bit risky, but yeah, even though if I make it, I have a charge, I have a flank, I might do a couple of wounds. The Pharaoh in my opponent's unit was, I believe, not on this side of the Phantom Host. So if I do just 1 wound even, then my opponent has 3 ranks and a banner, and he does some attacks, but probably doesn't do any wounds back. So I lose by 1. I'm close to my BSB, so I won't lose any wounds even. So yeah, it's something that I would assume most opponents wouldn't judge to be such a big brick of wounds. So they only have 8 wounds, but they can lock stuff up in place pretty effectively. Just yeah, even if I were to have a lot of bad luck there, then I would still be able to lock them up, because getting 6 wounds on my unit or so, yeah, it's still there. So that's number 1 that I had declared, and I would definitely repeat again. Then the vampire count is actually in combat. No, it's not in combat with the Shapti at this point. So here I was facing a dilemma, a very big dilemma. So the Vampire Knights in the top right, they are frenzied. So they have to take a frenzy check because they're within 15 inches of the Shapti with the bows. Yeah, that's a problem. So in this matchup, it was incredibly important to actually knock out his skeleton archers and the mages. So I was planning to. What happened before is that I just put up my vampire count in front of the Shapti and threatened the entire zone, and then my opponent had to shoot with his, or had to put his Shapti in front of my vampire count to prevent me from being able to charge anywhere I wanted, really. So I should have just continued this trend, put the vampire count on the other side of the Shapti, in a position where the Necropolis Guard of my opponent would not be able to charge after a reform if they were to manage to kill the Vampire Knights after I would have declared a charge on them. So what I did now was to declare the Vampire Knights into the Shapti with the bows together with the Vampire Count, thinking that I would just clean them up over like 2 turns or so. And probably I would have been right were it not for the fact that my Vampire Knights did not make it into combat. And the Shapti, they are actually quite a bit more sturdy than you would maybe judge at first sight. So yeah, that was the execution how I did it. But I can easily fit the vampire count behind the Shapti of my opponent. And then in the position of, well, if I go with the frontage of my vampire count facing to the left, just being on the hill, outside of line of sight of the Scorpion on the bottom, and in this way, if the Vampire Knights they charge the Necropolis Guard, there should be a possibility of deploying it in such a way that my opponent cannot post-combat pivot and then charge into my vampire count. And even if he does so, then it might still not be the worst, because I might be able to clean up the Necropolis Guard with my vampire count. Unless my opponent decides to fully dedicate also the Shapti to my vampire count. But in that case, he effectively took away from the rest of the board like 1/3 of the opponent's army. So it's yeah. So yeah, for the Vampire Knights, ideally I would have declared the furthest charge as possible, just sacrifice them. And then it would have been my opponent's choice whether to charge them with the Shapti. And then having the Shapti on the right in the top corner, it would have been a pain. But yeah, that might by the time it would have been a big problem. It could have been solved already. So yeah, that is what I think I should have done. Then the other thing is that I charged in the skeletons with the cord into the chariots. Should I have done that? I actually don't know once again, because my units are quite comfortable as they are. My skeletons with BSB, yeah, they took a big hit, so what is not really clear in the picture is that I lost already 3 ranks of skeletons, which is the dice on top of them just indicated right now. But I have my magic phase coming up, so I should be able to regrow some of those. I should be able to count on this. So if I actually leave the chariots where they are, well, it might be the question of whether I would be able to clear the chariots or not. If not, I would be able to clear them the next turn. So I'd not. There's no action needed there really. So I don't think I should have. I don't think so. No, probably not. So this is what you get when you play undead versus undead. It's such. Oh my god, yeah, it's such a big amount of thinking on whether you're going to crumble the other guy in this turn or the next turn, or whether you are not. Or anyway, so for the next one, the skeletons of my opponent with the Pharaoh, they do prove an issue to me because. Well, mostly because of the placement of the rest of the units right now. So the Shapti with the bows, they can countercharge if I charge into the skeletons with the Pharaoh and don't manage to fully lift them from the field in one go. The Winged Reapers together with the Dark Coach, both of them really need to make the charge in order for me to have any chance at doing so, because the skeletons have defensive of 5, 6 I think. And the Winged Reapers also have offensive 6, so I would need force to hit. I might be wrong about this. Yeah, I think I'm actually wrong about this. So then the Winged Reapers would need 3s to hit, so that's 6 in attacks, 3 to hit, 10 hits. Would still be 10 wounds. That's actually not too bad. But yeah, my opponent is going to be steadfast unless I'm able to remove all but 9 models. No. Even I have to remove all but 4 models because the Dark Coach is just a large construct, so it also doesn't have a rank. So I have no ranks anywhere. So my opponent is going to crumble maximum of 12 models, 12 wounds, and then there's a BSB, so only 11. So I'm no way gonna get through this unit in one go, not without my ranks. So I cannot declare a charge there because then the Shapti will countercharge, the Chariots will countercharge, and my Winged Reapers and Dark Coach will be gone. So it's a good call that I didn't do that. And also I measured before if the Great Bats could make it to the skeletons, and they actually can to chaff them up. So one thing that I didn't do in this particular case, well, I wanted to find a solution to the chariots, and I was very quick in moving the spectral hunters that were facing upwards to prevent my opponent from using his entombed chariots in the lake. I was very quick to move them all the way to the rear of the chariots to threaten them from the rear, and this was the wrong call. Because I could have just put them in front of the chariots in a position where it would have been impossible for the Shapti to charge in, because I could put them in the front of my unit, and then there would be my opponent's chariots, and whilst they could align, wait, you, would there be any possibility of, yeah, if you, they are light troops, so I could put them 3 wide in front of the chariots, and then the chariots cannot make the wheel to go corner to any of the 2 sides of the unit, so you cannot declare also a charge with the Shapti to go corner to corner with the with the Spectral Hunters. Because if you declare charges with 2 units at the same charge, at the same target, you ignore your own unit footprint during the charge move. So that would be the solution there. Because in that case, the chariots and the Shapti also both have to take a march test to see if they can march. And yeah, the Shapti are within general leadership, but the chariots are not. Ooh, that's a lot of thinking. So yeah, the Spectral Hunters should go in front of the chariots because they still might survive some of the hits with their 3+ ward save. I would expect the units to just fully crumble down. But I'm willing to sacrifice them for a sweet counter charge from the Dark Coach, which could sit on just a little bit more than 12 inches outside of line of sight, and then the Wing Creepers, outside of line of sight of the Shapti. And then the Wing Creepers, I could just pull them back and basically leave them in the position where they are, because I was going to chaff the skeletons of my opponent with the Great Bats. The chariots are gonna disappear, and then the skeletons with the BSB, they could next turn, if my opponent is gonna stay where he is, charge the skeletons with the Pharaoh. And then I maintain my defensive position, so my opponent cannot come in to kill me. So in this matchup, the skeletons with the BSB with Undying Will, so that the unit is stubborn, actually serves quite a pivotal role in the army, together with the Winged Reapers. Because it's just a brick that I can use to push up to my opponent. Because the setup I currently play is with a banner on the skeletons, with the Legion Standard, with the BSB, with also Legion Standard, with Undying Will and Destiny's Call. So I have a static combat res of 7. And then, my opponent isn't likely to go anyway to a very high combat res with that. If he does so, I'm going to be steadfast, so the the crumbling is going to be limited to 12. I am stubborn with the unit, so it's going to be halved to 6. I have a BSB, so that's going to be 5, and then the Winged Reapers are near, so it's going to be 4 skeletons that are going to fall dead if my opponent really wreaks havoc on the unit, as long as the BSB is alive. But he has his 4+ Aegis save and Hand of Glory to give him a 3+ Aegis save if inclined. Yeah, but that would have been the better play than what I actually did, because the Spectral Hunters, they went down to the rear of the chariots, leaving the chariots open for a charge on the Dark Coach, which I tried to protect by moving away as far as possible, but then my opponent made the charge. So yeah, I think that would have been my preferred answer here. And then my opponent's turn would be different depending on what would happen with the Phantom Hosts in the charge and the skeletons. Mostly that. Because you can't expect the chariots to deal so much damage that they can hold out for 2 turns. That's gonna be really difficult. And then my opponent is in a bit of a pickle. So one thing I believe I didn't mention is that the Vampire Knights should declare the charge against the skeletons if able, because if it would have been a 12, because I want to actually fail that charge. And then it's nicer to have the skeletons with the cord free and not out of combat, to be able to respond to what happens on the flank. So then after the either successful or failed charge of the Phantom Host, the skeletons with the cord should move up towards the right, just 2 inches. so that I have some space to react to the Shopti. Um, yeah, that's it. That would have been a better answer to my opponent's army at this stage than what I actually did in practice. Yeah, so